Hey, it's Drew from 198 Methods with a quick update on some of our shareholder season actions from the last 2 weeks and what we've been up to, as well as an appeal for your support. So starting about 2 weeks ago, we climbed up this very tall ladder to the top of the entryway at FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to drop this banner. Live streamed for about 5 hours from up there, and here's a quick synopsis of our demands for the commissioners.
So we're dedicating this section of the live feed to the FERC commissioners themselves, all four of y'all, and hope that this message will reach them before they go into vote today, so that we can specifically ask them not to approve these two LNG terminals that are on their docket, and ask them, as we have for years, just to not approve any new fossil fuel infrastructure and invest in renewable energy instead. And to that demand that we've been very consistent about for years, we can now add a more constructive or specific positive suggestion, which is to turn the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission into FREC, the Federal Renewable Energy Commission, with many of the same powers and duties, but a specific focus on building a 100% clean energy future as part of a Green New Deal.
Unfortunately, FERC did go on to approve those two LNG terminals in the Gulf of Mexico, but two things made us feel a little bit better about it. One was that Commissioner Chatterjee, pictured here, did sort of acknowledge us and thank us for our bravery in climbing up on his roof. Second thing that made us feel better was a quote after the orders came out from Commissioner Glick, one of the two Democrats and the only FERC commissioner who voted against the two LNG figures. Here's what Glick said: "Putting figures in there without context doesn't do anything. The dirty little secret of all this is that it doesn't matter how many emissions we're talking about, because if you follow the majority's approach through to its logical conclusion, we're never going to consider greenhouse gas emissions as significant, no matter how large the emissions are." So even though we weren't able to convince the commissioners not to support these two LNG export terminals, we were able to kind of get in their heads and put some arguments forward that have been picked up by Commissioner Glick. And of course, the other piece of good news is that Ted and I were able to climb down from the roof safely, and that no one was arrested as part of this nonviolent direct action. And all of us will be back soon to help turn FERC into FREC. So on to Charlotte now, where last week we attended the Bank of America Shareholders meeting. One prime area of concern for Bank of America was their funding of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. This is the big frack gas pipeline that is a huge risk for investors as well as the climate, and has been researched recently by our friends at Friends of the Earth and Oil Change. And you can see here one of the things that activists were able to do is drop this really big banner across the street from the shareholder meeting, but facing the meeting. This would be like the view if you were standing in the courtyard of the building where the shareholder meeting was. And this was dropped and hung on steel cables so that it was not very easy for folks to remove. And it says Bank of America, Atlantic Coast Pipeline, and frack gas equal financial and climate disasters. And this is all happening in the context of the broader shareholder season. There have been actions at big banks and shareholder meetings around the world, in Scotland and in Italy and in Sweden and all over the place this year, asking the biggest financiers of fossil fuel pollution and pipelines to divest from climate chaos and instead invest in climate solutions. All of which brings us to our last planned event of shareholder season, which is going to the Dominion shareholder meeting on May 7th. Dominion is an especially important target for this stuff because they have pledged in the past to abide by the Paris Climate Agreement and reduce their emissions commensurate with that. But in fact, they get well less than 10% of their electricity supply from renewable energy, and they just bought our major utility company here in South Carolina, where I live. So we'll be going on May 7th to their shareholder meeting in Columbia, South Carolina, to explain our demands and ask them to divest from the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and from fossil fuels as well. We went to FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We went to Bank of America. We actually went to a Wells Fargo protest a few weeks before that, also in Charlotte. And this is all happening in the context of this kind of global movement asking big banks and financial institutions to divest from fossil fuels and invest in renewable energy future. So why are we doing all this right now, and why is it so important that you get involved? The short answer is, if you've followed anything that we've written in the last year or so, and all the science on climate change, you know, we have about 12 years to make really dramatic changes to overhaul our energy economy and our consumer economy and all the different parts, so that we can get a head start in this country, in America, on reducing climate change emissions in time to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. So that 12-year time horizon is really important. And that's why we need right now, today, this year, people to stop investing in fossil fuel infrastructure, things like pipelines and export terminals and compressor stations and all that stuff, because that locks in another 10 to 20 to 50 years of fossil fuel reliance. Every time we build a new pipeline, they're gonna fill it up with oil, gas, and other fossil fuels. Every time we build an export terminal, we are committing to dig that fossil fuel out of the ground here in America and send it abroad where it will get burned and contribute to climate change. It is vital that we stop right now the investment in climate chaos and begin redirecting that capital into renewable energy and the Green New Deal vision. And we asked for that as a policy shift in the FERC not FERC action that we did in Washington, D.C., climbing up on that roof and asking the agency to transform itself to stop approving pipelines and start focusing on renewable energy. But we can also do that at the investor level. We can ask individual companies, shareholders, and banks to choose to prioritize their money in that way. And that's what this whole shareholder season of action has been about. All of these different actions, I've gone to several different cities and states over the last couple of weeks. There are local organizers all over the country leading these actions. And there are tons of different things happening, from Green New Deal town halls to lobby visits with representatives about the Green New Deal and making sure that fossil fuel phase out is included in that, to all of these different shareholder meetings that I'm telling you about. And all of that stuff needs support. So we're asking you today, if you can, to chip in. It could be $1.98. That's our favorite amount. It could be a weekly donation. It could be a larger donation. Whatever you can afford, your support will help us keep getting out to these actions, supporting other organizers on the ground, and making sure that there is a consistent across the board demand in every country, in every city, at every shareholder meeting, at every regulatory meeting, that tells people there is a different, better way to do things, ending fossil fuels, investing in renewable energy as part of a Green New Deal. So thanks so much for being part of all the stuff we do at 198 Methods. I'm Drew, and see you soon.